Welcome to High Level History. In 1910, the world was a drastically different place. Kings still reigned with significant power across the world, and monarchy was a dominant form of government. This week, we talk about one of the last royal events prior to World War I, and the largest gathering of European royals ever, the funeral of King Edward VII of the United Kingdom. This event had an odd confluence of modern technology and aged tradition, merged to give posterity an image unlike ever before. 9 reigning kings, pictured together in mourning. Before we talk about King Edward VII's funeral in 1910, we have to understand why so many notable people attended it. All of these kings had their own kingdoms to run, and travel in that era was not nearly as rapid nor comfortable as it is today. Add in the complexity of the lack of rapid communication over long distances, and the business of running their countries from abroad becomes a tricky feat. Attendance at this funeral was not just because the dead person was the king of a large kingdom. No, there was a deeper, more personal purpose. The story starts with King Edward VII's mother, Queen Victoria. Legendary in history for her long reign of 63 years, the Victorian era of the British Empire was an unparalleled height. The hegemon of the world, the sun, did not set on the British Empire. On the home front, the Queen was no different. She held an iron grip on her family, and particularly their dynastic futures. In the 19th century, royal marriages were not conducted for love, but rather for political and dynastic ambition. Queen Victoria and her husband, Prince Albert, were no different. Of the 9 children the couple had, each was married into key European houses. Of those marriages, 6 produced children who would later sit on thrones. The eldest, Princess Victoria, married the heir of the German Empire, Prince and later Emperor Friedrich. She had 6 children, including the future Emperor Wilhelm II, as well as future Queen of Greece, Sophia. Edward, later King Edward VII, married Princess Alexandra of Denmark. The couple had 6 children, including George V of the United Kingdom, as well as Princess Maud, who would later become Queen of Norway. Princess Alice married Grand Duke of Hessen-Biran, Louis. The couple had 7 children. One of their daughters would become the last Empress of Russia, Alexandra Fyodorovna. Alfred, Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, married Grand Duchess Maria Alexandrovna of Russia, a daughter of a Tsar in her own right. The couple had 6 children, including the future Queen Marie of Romania. Prince Arthur, Duke of Connaught and Strathearn, married Princess Louise of Margaret of Prussia. The couple had 3 children, including the future Crown Princess of Sweden, Margaret. Lastly, Princess Beatrice married Henry of Battenberg. The couple had 4 children, including the future Queen Victoria Eugenie of Spain. Through these marriages, there was a complex web of relationships between multiple different monarchies across Europe. To further complicate the family birth chart, the pool of candidates for royal marriage was severely limited, and as such, intermarriage between cousins was commonplace. The queen did not stop at arranging the marriages of her children. She was also intimately involved with the marriage prospects of her many grandchildren. Like most families, the queen would often host her children and grandchildren at her own home in the United Kingdom. It was at these family functions that future kings and queens would start their own personal relationships. The dynastically successful marriages of Queen Victoria's children and grandchildren earned her the sobriquet Grandmother of Europe. On Queen Victoria's death in 1901, Albert Edward, her eldest son, became King Edward VII. The king's main interest was foreign policy. His first real foray into the international relations realm happened when he was just 19 years old. He was sent on a tour of North America, the first Prince of Wales to do so. On the trip, he visited many notable sites. In Canada, he toured the maritime colonies. Moving inland, he inaugurated Victoria Bridge in Montreal and laid a cornerstone at Parliament in Ottawa. The Niagara Falls were, in fact, first illuminated for the prince during his tour. He further traveled through the United States, dining with the president, paying respects to George Washington at his tomb, and in general, being a good sport. The trip was a massive success and earned the royal family and Edward, particularly a lot of what modern experts would call good press. Despite his mother's general apathy towards his skills and intelligence, Edward was relatively accomplished in the realm of international relations. He spoke French and German fluently, which he used in great effect to communicate with his family across the continent. As king, he was famously responsible in aiding in achieving the Entente Cordiale between France and the United Kingdom. He also leveraged his relations with the other key houses in royal Europe to benefit his kingdom. If his mum was the grandmother of Europe, he, as her eldest child, was the uncle of Europe. Queen Victoria Eugenia of Spain, Crown Princess Margaret of Sweden, Crown Princess Marie of Romania, Crown Princess Sophia of Greece, and Empress Alexandra of Russia were all his nieces, while his nephews included Wilhelm, the German emperor, and Nicholas II, the Tsar of Russia. King Edward ruled a comparatively short amount of time, less than 10 years, but he did leave his mark on Europe. For instance, he was the first king of the United Kingdom to visit Imperial Russia, making his fateful trip in 1908. He got along well with his nephew, Nicholas II. Nicholas was in general a shy person, but Edward's personality drew the young ruler in, an effect the king had on many other family members across Europe. As the elder royal on the continent, as well as the king of a vast empire, Edward tended to draw the attention, likely lessening the burden for others in his extended family, who in their own right were used to the attention, but happy not to be the center of it for once. This brings us to 1910 and the funeral of Edward VII. So gorgeous was the spectacle on the May morning of 1910 when 9 kings rode in the funeral of Edward VII of England that the crowd, waiting in hushed and black-clawed awe, could not keep back gasps of admiration. In scarlet and blue and green and purple, 3 by 3 the sovereigns rode through the palace gates with plumed helmets, gold braid, crimson sashes, and jeweled orders flashing in the sun. After them came 5 heirs apparent, 40 more imperial or royal highnesses, 7 queens, 4 dowager and 3 regnant, and a scattering of special ambassadors from uncrowned countries. Barbara W. Tuckman. The funeral for King Edward VII was a grand affair, fitting for his status as the most senior of the royals of Europe. According to parliamentary papers from July 1910, the funeral cost £40,500, adjusting for inflation that is roughly $5 million in modern money, only slightly more expensive than his mother, Queen Victoria's funeral, a decade earlier. On the morning of the funeral, Big Ben rang 68 times, one for each year of the king's life. This tradition would continue on for subsequent monarchs. As for the faded picture of the 9 kings, the reason these kings are all assembled at the funeral of another king is simple. It's because they're family. From left to right, King Hakon of Norway, a nephew and son-in-law, King Ferdinand of Bulgaria, a second cousin, King Manuel of Portugal, another second cousin, Kaiser Wilhelm of Germany, a nephew, King George of Greece, a brother-in-law, and King Albert of Belgium, another second cousin. Seated in the picture are King Alfonso of Spain, King Edward's nephew-in-law, his son, George V of the United Kingdom, and his brother-in-law, King Frederick of Denmark. Other notable guests who attended the funeral include former President Teddy Roosevelt, representing the United States, Prince Muhammad Ali of Egypt, Prince Zaitao of China, Prince Fushimi Sadanaru of Japan, whilst Prince Luis represented Brazil, and lastly representing the Ottoman Empire, the Crown Prince Shehzade Yusuf Izzeddin. As the 20th century began, the death of King Edward VII marked the end of a bygone era. The acceleration of militarization, nationalism, imperialism, and a complex alliance system led to many of the family members attending the funeral to be on opposite sides of a world war only 4 short years later. In fact, Kaiser Wilhelm commented as much at the onset of World War I when he said, "If our grandmother were alive, she would have never allowed it." A cheeky retort at the fact that he was cousins with both King of the United Kingdom and the Tsar of Russia. So close were the families that George V and Nicholas II actually look like twins, a striking similarity one can see in the many photographs they have together. Only 5 of the 9 monarchies represented still exist today: Norway, Spain, the United Kingdom, Denmark, and Belgium. Bulgaria, Germany, Portugal, and Greece all excised their monarchies. In an interesting oddity of history, these 4 kings are standing together in the back row of the picture. The image of the 9 kings in mourning is so striking because it emerged as a result of dynastic planning between 2 generations before. A system envisioned by Queen Victoria and Prince Albert culminated in this final family event. Unfortunately, the bonds the royal couple hoped to forge across Europe were not strong enough to stop the confluence of war. Thank you for tuning into this episode of High Level History. Please like and subscribe on YouTube and on your favorite podcast platform. We appreciate your support.